Trigger warning, we're talking about residential schools. Are you learning about residential schools for the first time, or do you want to know a little bit more about this part of our history? If either of these sounds like you, or if you've heard about residential schools before, but you're not totally sure what it means, then this video is for you. Hi there, I'm Mallory. Welcome back to the Tribal Trade channel, where we share new videos every single week about smudging, Indigenous culture, Native teachings, and more. Be sure to subscribe and hit the bell so that you never miss a video. If you're a non-Indigenous person, it can sometimes be tricky or even scary to ask an Indigenous person questions about a topic you feel they might be able to help you with or shed some light on. That's why we wanted to give you a few tips for asking about a sensitive topic, residential schools. Here at Tribal Trade, we really want to help people, Indigenous and non-Indigenous, connect with and learn about Indigenous culture. And that means encouraging conversations, even about the difficult stuff. So if you're hearing more and more lately about residential schools and you want to start asking your Indigenous friends, family, or colleagues questions about it, then you need to know how to respectfully ask these kinds of questions. And this video is a great way to get started. So keep watching for 3 of my best tips for asking an Indigenous person about residential schools as a non-Indigenous person. Conversations about topics like residential schools can be extremely challenging. That's why it's best to be prepared and know these 3 important tips when asking Indigenous people about residential schools. The first tip for asking Indigenous people about residential schools is to do your own research first. It's not the responsibility of any Indigenous person to educate you, especially when so many resources like books, videos, podcasts, and movies exist that explain the history of residential schools. While conversations can be a powerful tool, make sure you're not putting the pressure or responsibility on your Indigenous friends or relatives to teach you about this part of history. It's important for you to learn on your own too. Do your own research before asking questions. This will help you obtain a baseline understanding of residential schools. From there, you can have a more informed conversation, and you can be sure that you and any Indigenous person you speak with will at least be on the same page about the basics. The second tip for asking Indigenous people about residential schools is understand what you're asking. Please be aware that by asking an Indigenous person to share their knowledge about and experience with residential schools, you're possibly triggering and upsetting them. This is understandably a difficult topic for all Indigenous people and should be treated as such. Recognize that by asking questions, you're asking that person for a lot of honesty, vulnerability, and even asking them to share their pain. Be mindful that no one has to share information or answer questions that you have unless they are completely comfortable doing so. Be aware of and okay with the fact that you might be told no, or that the person might not agree to have the conversation with you at all, and that's okay. Always lead with kindness, understanding, and empathy when you ask people to share their experiences with you, especially surrounding this topic. How have you learned more about residential schools? Is this the first that you're hearing of them? Please share your thoughts with us in the comments below. Now I have one final tip to share with you for today. The third tip for asking Indigenous people about residential schools is to determine your questions beforehand. One of the very best ways you can demonstrate your respect and empathy for the situation is by coming prepared. That not only means doing your research beforehand, but even determining your questions beforehand. Because this is a very emotional and sensitive conversation that you need to approach from a mindful place. Try having your questions ready in advance. That way you'll be prepared for any possible response, even no response. This will allow you to navigate the conversation calmly and responsibly, making it easier for everyone involved. Now, following these 3 tips can truly help you have a more successful conversation with any Indigenous person and ensure that you're doing your fair share of the hard work. Following these guidelines demonstrates that you're committed to an open conversation and that you are respectful of the lived experience of the person that you're talking to. As always, the most important thing you can do is be kind and understanding. If you're a non-Indigenous person who who would like to know more about Indigenous culture and topics without having to ask the Indigenous people in your life, tons of resources exist for you, even right here at Tribal Trade Co. Check out our blog that covers tons of Indigenous teachings and traditions, or sign up for one of our many workshops that can help you become more knowledgeable about Indigenous teachings of all kind. We hope you find these tips helpful as you navigate difficult conversations and navigate asking Indigenous people questions about topics like residential schools. If you want to be part of an inclusive community where you can have these kinds of discussions, or if you're ready to learn more about Indigenous topics and teachings, join us on Facebook for community, discussion, education, and fun too. When did you first learn about residential schools? Please share with us in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you next time.